So good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. This is an online streaming when we'll be discussing about educating the future natural gas engineers, which they will be leading the energy transition. So if you have any questions, of course, feel free to share them with us. So I'll start my presentation. It's not going to last more than 40 minutes, actually 35 minutes, I think that will do. And during that time, I'll try to go through to give you an overview what is energy basically, why is it important, why is it valuable. So I'll be presenting to begin with basically all of the important types of energy, and at the same time I'll be discussing what are the advantages and disadvantages for each and every one of them. And of course, as you are well aware, now there is a major discussion whether we'll be shifting basically from fossil fuels to renewable types of energy. So we get the chance to engage in that conversation. And of course, central to that are the CO2 emissions, as you can see from your screen, and subsequently the future energy mix, which is going to craft the way for a more sustainable future. And an important role in all of that discussion would be natural gas. So I get the chance to explain what we refer to that, and then what tools, what skills, what capabilities should future energy engineers possess in order to lead and navigate their way successfully through that energy transition. Okay, so that's the overview for what we're going to be discussing today. So what is energy is the fundamental question. Actually, energy is a complicated concept if it's approached from the engineering and physics standpoint, but in simple terms, is the capacity or ability to do work. So what keeps the light on, what drives your car, your vehicle, basically, what allows ships to move in the ocean, and what permits for planes to fly in the air. This is called energy. It can take different forms: chemical energy, it could be in the form of fuel, the most important source of energy, of course, right? And in addition, it can take different forms like mechanical, nuclear, electrical, magnetic, electromagnetic, and the like. The important thing for you to take note is what does this distinguish between renewable and non-renewable forms of energy. And the answer to that is the time frame it takes for that form of energy to form, to develop. Okay, so in the case of fossil fuels, which includes oil, gas, and diesel or crude oil together with coal, it takes several millions of years for that energy to form, whereas if we're talking about wind, it's on the order of a few days. The most it can be in the matter of a few hours. So it's the time frame that these types of energy takes for them to develop. Speaking of energy, it's important to paint the picture what's going on in the world as we speak. Why is it important? Why does the world should care about energy? So the energy is what drives the world around. It enables a modern lifestyle, as you can gather, keeping the hospitals active, having electricity, air conditioning, the fridge functioning, whatever that is required power, and power we refer to electricity, is generated by using fuels or renewable energy, which is the other form of energy that we'll be discussing. So according to the International Energy Agency, that's an important piece of information to take note. About 1.3 million people as we speak, they don't have access to reliable power. So if there is continued electricity supply, this is going to unlock the prospects and the future of billions of people, as you can tell, and this is going to help them come out of poverty. Okay, so that's important. In terms of this, the world's energy mixture, these fossil fuels, which includes coal, natural gas, and oil, it has been the case for the past more than, I would say, 50 years. And if we don't do anything to change this energy mixture, it's going to be predominantly fossil fuels. At 2018, the latest data that we have, 81% of the world's energy mix was met by fossil fuels, and it's going to continue to be the case until 2040. And these are predictions from the International Energy Agency. So it's important for the energy basically to help lift out of poverty a lot of the world's poor people in Africa and also in Asia, as you can see from the screen, including China, India, and major other economies like Pakistan, Bangladesh, Indonesia, and the like, which are very populous. So speaking of energy, it would be good to just give you a brief overview. What are the sources or resources we're talking about? So we have fossil fuels, we mentioned them before. We have renewables forms of energy, and this comprises, as you can tell, we have solar, so this includes photovoltaics and solar thermal. We have wind, hydro power, geothermal, tidal energy. So the most important sources of renewable energy is solar and wind and hydro, geothermal and tidal to a lesser extent. Of course, nuclear is of fundamental importance. We have biofuels, which to a lesser extent, and we also have what's called the fifth fuel, which is energy conservation. So let us see, in terms of an overview, what are these types of energy and why they're important. So this is going to be a fast-forward discussion of what the type of energy is, and as well as the pros and cons that each type of energy has. So petroleum, you're well aware of that. This is a fossil fuel. Basically, is obtained from the decay through the passage of millions of years of ancient algae, marine life, etc. So this forms and this gives rise to a viscous, usually black fluid, which we extract from the ground, and subsequently we process it to generate different grades through fractional distillation. For example, gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, heavy fuel oil, etc. The most common one being diesel, gasoline, and jet fuel. Of course, it contains superb energy density. It's relatively safe. It's cheap. We can easily buy it and come across in the market of that. And it's usually heavily taxed from governments. But in addition, it generates a major side effect, which are emissions. And this is what is driving basically this energy transition as we speak. But it's not only about petroleum. We also have natural gas. Natural gas is a fossil fuel, of course, but it's cleaner compared to diesel, gasoline, and the like. So natural gas, as you can appreciate, this is the cleanest of hydrocarbons. It consists mainly of methane, CH4. So if it gets burned, it liberates heat, water vapor, and also CO2 emissions, right? But it doesn't generate as many emissions, NOx, SOx, and the like the other types of fuel, for example, coal. Natural gas, of course, has the advantage of being quite common. It's non-toxic, it's not corrosive, and if we liquefy it, we can export it, and is used in a lot of applications, from power generation to making fertilizers to transportation, and also in cooling at home. So this is a versatile fuel that is relatively abundant, but it's difficult to transport from one location to another. So this is how that's the case of natural gas. Don't be deceived that it's encountered in the ground in the form of a pool. Basically, this is embedded in a porous medium, which is rock, and we extract it. Usually it flows by itself on the surface, and then subsequently gets treated and then gets transported using pipelines or exported using LNG ships to major markets in the world. Okay. So in addition, we have the third fossil fuel, which is coal. Coal is considered to be mineralized carbon, which is plenty. There is a lot of it in the world. In addition, it contains some other elements: hydrogen, sulfur, oxygen, nitrogen, etc. and it's the most pollutant of the fossil fuels. It's used for power generation, it's used in smelters to create from iron ore, steel, etc. But it emits a lot of CO2, a lot of NOx, a lot of SOx. So this is what makes this fuel problematic. And right now, as we speak, there is a major drive to decarbonize the world's energy chains and power generation, like in Germany and several other developed countries, including developing countries. So, but it's still an important source of fuel, and it's going to remain as we speak, especially for poorer populations. But it's not only about fossil fuels. Since we're talking about energy transition, it also includes renewables. So solar energy is the most common of which, so this includes photovoltaics, solar thermal. These are the most common types of solar energy that gives rise, basically, that generates electricity. So we can install PV cells on the rooftop and generate electricity. This is fair and good. The thing about it is that the energy density of this type of energy is not as dense as in the case of fossil fuels. So it requires a lot of surface area. And of course, as you can appreciate, during the night, you cannot generate electricity. So what do we do with that? How do we meet our energy needs in the night when the sun doesn't shine? And the answer is use storage, but this is not quite to the level that we would like it to be. Okay, so there are still a lot of shortcomings that need to be addressed. As you can see here, we have the major technologies. We have solar thermal on the left-hand side. This is solar troughs. Major ones. We have this heliostat, as you can see. This is in Spain. We have Fresnel lenses. We have this dish-like structure, and also we have photovoltaics, and we have the solar upthrust system in the middle of this image. And of course, we also have solar thermal passive heating at homes, where Cyprus, by the way, is the world's #1, as you can appreciate, in the world. Okay, so I will have 1.1 cubic square meters per capita. So I hope my screen shows and the slides change. So if it doesn't change, then I have to go and check it again. So if there's an issue, let me check it. So for me, it looks like the slides they don't move forward. So I'm gonna try and reshare the screen with you guys. Hopefully this is going to resolve the problem, because for me the screen changes, but maybe for you is not the case. So if you give me a second, I'll stop sharing and then share again to amend the problem. Sorry for that. Okay, so hopefully this is going to resolve the problem. I'll tell you in a second, or you can tell me if that's the case. Okay, all right, so this is going to take a bit until it becomes effective, the screen, the sharing. Okay, all right, so, and in addition, there is plenty of solar potential. Cyprus, I would just mention that it has the second largest potential in Europe after Malta, but we're still very good at it. And I'll just state here that despite the fact that there is a lot of sunshine in Cyprus, the fact that we have very high temperatures, the performance of photovoltaic systems deteriorates as temperature increases, and as a result, this can be problematic in terms of how much energy we can harvest from the sun. Okay, and then we have a lot of other types of energies, like we have wind. As you can appreciate, wind, it rotates basically a turbine, and that turbine is connected basically to an electric generator, and this is what generates electricity. And these wind turbines, they can be installed onshore, they can be installed offshore, and they constitute the cheapest type of renewable energy. Okay. I'll just emphasize here that the electricity generated from wind energy in the night, it can still be operational, whereas in the case of solar energy, we don't have that happening because the sun doesn't shine in the night, of course, as you would expect. And then we have hydro energy. So this is energy that is collected from water that is stored in a dam and is directed towards an impeller, These impellers, as you can see from the screen, if the slides move, I think there is a problem with the slides. I don't know why the case. Basically it generates electricity by having this electric generator being rotated by the flowing water, because there is potential in terms of the height of the water that it has been stored in a dam. Of course, you need to have the dam for that. And it's kind of interesting that this type of energy is considered to be non-renewable above a threshold, despite the fact that water can be brought down and then reused again, what we call pump hydro. We also have nuclear energy. Several countries are phasing this out. It doesn't generate any emissions. It doesn't generate any CO2, of course, but it requires a source of radioactive element, uranium, for example. And this is what scares people off. But some countries, they use it quite commonly, like, for example, France is being used in China and several other countries. But I wouldn't say that this type of energy is going to make a substantial contribution to the world's energy mix as the future goes by. And we also have biofuels. For example, you can think of corn. This is used to generate fuel in liquid form that can be used, for example, in transportation. This type of energy has garnered much attention and criticism because of the fact that this type of fuel can be used, or the corn, for example, can be used to feed the world's population instead of being used, for example, to generate fuel. So this is another thing to take into account. All right, so as we mentioned, guys, each type of energy has its pros and cons, both positive and negative aspects. So it's important to explore this, and then we will conclude by what it takes, what's going to be the future energy mix, and in addition, what we expect to be the skills that the future engineers are going to require in order basically to be able to meet the energy challenge and the cleaner fuels of the world in the nearby future to year 2015, and also to meet the COP commitments and the United Nations targets that have been set. So fossil fuels, they're quite commonly used. They're relatively safe. Actually, they're very safe. They're practical. They contain high energy density, and in addition, they can be used in a lot of applications. For example, making nylon, plastic, cosmetics. It's a versatile fuel that it can be used in. You can think whatever you can think. For example, ink. It can be plastic that is used to do your computer, toys, shoes, you name it. Whatever you can see here from the screen, basically it has as a raw material petroleum, and this has made it on one side basically a very useful type of fuel, and on the other hand, because of the debris that it gets created and the plastics that reach the environment, it has converted it basically into a curse, and there are regulations right now as we speak to try to contain what's being dropped in the environment and to decrease the amount of plastics. All right, so speaking of transportation, it's important to just mention that both the negative and the positive side of things. Right now, there is a major discussion taking place for the electrification of transportation. They're talking about having electric trucks and also ships and even airplanes. But the first important side to discuss about is land transportation, personal vehicles. Okay, so I'll just mention here a Tesla Model 3. As you can see on the left-hand side of your screen. I think you don't see my screen. I don't know why. I hope you can hear me at least. Right. Elon Musk basically manufactures this vehicle, the Tesla Model 3. It costs about $31,000, and if you charge it once, it can cover a distance of 350 kilometers. Whereas on the other hand, if you have a conventional vehicle, for example, Chevy Cruze, that costs 17,000 euros basically to buy, and you fill it once using diesel, it's going to cover a distance of 1,450 kilometers without requiring any fueling. So if you were to choose of the two, which one would you go for and why? And it depends on the budget, it depends on the subsidies, etc. But of course, in India and in China, Pakistan, Brazil, and other countries, which they are developing countries, people cannot afford to buy a pretty expensive and sleek vehicle like a Tesla model. So they would go for conventional vehicle, probably powered by LPG, liquefied petroleum gas. So this is something to keep in mind. But it's not only about the transportation. In addition, we have to consider when there is no sun shining or when there is no wind blowing, how do we meet the energy demand of the world? So one of the ideas that has garnered much attention in the past decade and now it's becoming even more important is to have batteries to store electricity when there is no generation of electricity. But of course, bear in mind that we have to have an oversupply when the sun shines and when the wind blows in order to meet demand at that time. And in addition, basically, to also store and use it during the night or during hours that there is not sufficient demand to meet sufficient electricity to meet demand. And bear in mind that electricity doesn't stay, the demand for electricity doesn't stay still. It's not constant. It could fluctuate during the day when we have air conditioning, like in the summer, and during 7, 8 o'clock in the afternoon when there is a demand there. When people need it the most. So we need to have that ability to store the electricity and source it to consumers. And I will just mention here that storing electricity is easier said than done and is not as cheap as it sounds. So right now we don't have a way of storing electricity at big scale to be able to meet cities of millions of people. So electricity storage is going to become important, but is not going to be able to meet base load demand, the underlying needs in the next decade or so. So if we're to compare renewable energy and fossil fuels, think of just one simple example. I have a power kettle, as you can see here, it generates heat to warm water, right? That's a 2.4 kilowatt kettle, and I would like to power that. How many photovoltaics would I need? So think of it that each photovoltaic unit that it shows here, each panel basically, it's about 330 watts each one. Basically, it would require 8 panels of that, as you can see on your screen, to just power that electric kettle. That is for renewable energy, and the fact that the energy density of renewable energy is not as high as in the case of fossil fuels, this is what makes this need. So you have to have 8 panels that they have a surface area of about 14 square meters to meet that demand, and this is going to cost about 3,200 euros as we speak. In addition, if I were to have an electric generator that costs the same amount of money, right, and it consumes about 3 liters of diesel per hour, this is going to be able to generate 9.5 kilowatts. Okay, so this is we're talking about more than 4 times what the photovoltaic system can meet. So you can make up your mind, but there are pros and cons to what we try to do. So it's up to you to choose what type of energy to utilize and why. So as we mentioned before, we have to meet the demands for electricity, the demands for transportation, but we have to consider also the side effects, the environmental issues, and what we call the problems that arise with the use of fossil fuels, or what we term as issues that arise because of overuse or because of the major utilization. So one of them, which is generating much attention, attracting much attention, basically, are CO2 emissions. So the level of CO2 emissions have been increasing in the past 60 years, right? And as a result, this has triggered a lot of governments, including the United Nations, as well, to take action, starting with COP21 in Paris, France, and subsequently there's going to be the latest one is going to be in Scotland. And they try to set binding targets, including the EU and China, The US, I would say, together with Syria, are the only exceptions. They're not taking part in that commitments, and the world's major economies are trying to drive down CO2 emissions. And the way, one of the ways that has been suggested that this can be done, basically, is to decrease the amount of fossil fuels that is utilized to generate electricity, or it can be used in transportation and other types of activities. So what is the sources of emissions in the world? So we have energy that is about 3/4. So energy includes power, that is electricity generation, transportation, land, air transportation. It also includes other major sources. And in addition, we have industrial, agriculture, and waste. So long story short, if we're going to get emissions down, energy is the important aspect to look at. So if we try to break this down, who emits what? As you can see from here, from this chart, China generates about 1/3 of the world's emissions. That was data from 2015. The US is about 18%. The EU is 10%. Russia, India, and the world's developing countries about 1/4. So the important thing to take notice, guys, even if the EU becomes carbon neutral by year 2050, and the US continues to emit emissions, or at least keeps it constant, and China doesn't reduce it as much, it means that still the world's emissions are going to continue to drive to increase as time goes by. So the thing is that whatever decision is taken, we have to take into account the fact that we have to keep the major polluters to control emissions. So give me a second, guys, and it looks my screen doesn't function. I don't know why. I'll try to get it up again. Wait, sorry, give me a second. I stopped sharing and I tried to share it again because it looks there is an issue. Give me a second. I hope you can see the slides. Unfortunately, there was an issue. I hope this is going to get resolved in a bit. I hope. No. Let me try again. Still, the problem has not been resolved. I don't know why this is the case. I think now it shows. No. Is it okay now? I hope. All right, let me try something else. Unfortunately, so which is the thing that's causing the problem? Share screen. Okay, no. Okay, now still doesn't show. Sorry, guys. Presentation. So okay, now it shows. Okay, all right. I keep it like that, but I will not make it full screen. Okay, all right. Sorry. Okay, all right. So we move on with that. The thing is that I don't know if it's gonna go back again. Okay, all right. So continue from where we left things. So the world's top CO2 emitters includes China, as we have seen. We have the US, EU, Russia, and Japan. And from that, the energy sector basically makes up 40% of the energy industries, 40% of these emissions, or about 30% of the global emissions. So if we're going to get down emissions, we have to change the energy mix of the world, and we have to focus unavoidably on the energy industries. So how would the future energy mix look like? Of course, it has to be cleaner. It has to have less carbon content. In addition, it would have unavoidably more electric vehicles. I think we have the same problem again, despite the fact that... okay, now it's better, right? So, and of course, it's going to be on low carbon fuels, namely natural gas, for example, less coal and less diesel, right? But still, the fossil fuels are going to dominate the world's energy mix until year 2014, and likewise, they're going to have a substantial contribution to emissions. Of course, there has to be an emphasis on addressing the issue of intermittency, for example, in electricity generation from solar energy or from wind when the wind is not blowing. And it looks like that batteries alone are not going to be able to meet this demand unless they are used virtually everywhere, and the cost comes down dramatically. The important thing to also take into notice is that nuclear energy should not be removed from the energy mix. Natural gas use has to increase, of course, and the contribution of renewable energy has to increase as well. But the major source of emissions is going to be from developing countries, of course, and this is one of the things that we need to take into account. What is driving change is going to be the COP targets, under the aegis of the United Nations, and the major polluters like China, India are going to play an instrumental role, despite the fact that the EU is pledging to go carbon neutral in 2050. And of course, any changes in the leadership of the US is going to drive change and reduce emissions. But the important thing to take into account, guys, is that fossil fuels are here to stay, and if we're going to meet these energy needs, we have to consider different types of energy, change the proportion of that, but we will not be able to eliminate altogether the dominant sources of energy. So, an important role is the role of natural gas. So natural gas, as we mentioned, is the cleanest of the fossil fuels. It generates much less emissions compared to coal and oil. It's quite common. There is plenty of it in the world. It can be transported using pipelines and LNG vessels, right? And it can be used in a lot of applications, from power generation to transportation to making petrochemicals, plastic, you name it. So this is a major source of fuel that its utilization is going to continue to increase from various projections that we have and from what we understand. So why is it important to use more natural gas? Because it generates less emissions. So this is going to generate less pollution. And in addition, the price of natural gas is not as expensive compared to other forms of energy, and it's able to generate electricity and used in transportation 24/7 without having to worry about any intermittency issues. But of course, there are negative downsides to that it requires a lot of space. It's not easy to move around, right? So whatever we choose, you have to appreciate that there are both positives and negatives to that, and we will not be able to meet the world's energy mix without making compromisations in a lot of respects. So I'm just showing you here some major discoveries that have been made. That is the Eastern Med. This is Cyprus. As you can tell from here, we have major fields like Aphrodite. We have Lafkus as well that has been discovered, and we have Zor and several other fields like in Israel and also Egypt. And the good thing about Cyprus is that it's blessed with plenty of natural gas, and we have to develop that natural gas in order to utilize it and also feed the markets, including Europe, which is in need of this cleaner type of fuel. I'll just flag one example. This is the Aphrodite gas field that hopefully is going to enter production in 2024. The revenue for Cyprus is estimated to be around 10 billion. And the development of that is going to cost about 3.5 billion. These are back of the envelope calculations. So I think we mentioned a lot of the details regarding what is energy, what is the world's energy mix, etc. And it would be important to talk about what would skills and requirements and also tools would these future energy engineers need in order to meet the world's energy challenge of generate continuous, cleaner, less carbon intensive energy and cheap, abundant energy for the decades to come. I'll just mention that the University of Nicosia is, as you probably know, is the Cyprus' largest institution. We have a big student body. And the Department of Engineering, where I'm stationed as well, it has 4 programs, including oil, gas, and energy engineering. So these are the programs that we offer. We have BSc, the MSc, and the PhD program in oil, gas, and energy engineering. All of our programs are accredited by the Ministry of Education in Cyprus and the Cyprus Technical Chamber, also known as ETEC. Here you see some of our students and some of the field trips, as you can see from the right-hand side on your screen, that they have went to field trips. So we have students from more than 20 countries now, and a student cohort of about 600 undergraduates and about 30 graduate students. These are some of the classes that have been taught and are still taught at the programs that we have in order to equip our students with the fundamentals to be able to meet the energy challenges that the world basically is posing. So in addition to teaching, in addition to theoretical classes, we also have experimental facilities. We have labs. We have computing facilities like testing rocks. We do geology classes. We can take a sample, for example, of natural gas and test it in the chromatograph to see the composition. And we do a lot of training for our students in order to become qualified engineers to meet these world's energy needs. So some of the software packages that have been donated to us, and we have also acquired several of them, include Petrel, CMG, Eclipse, Pipesym, etc. So the point I'm trying to get across, guys, is that these software pieces are important basically to help our students and the future engineers basically be able to become versed in software, in programming, and also to be able to meet an increasingly digitized world. Some other activities that our students do, and they're going to become increasingly more important in the nearby future. So it's not only about having online classes. These are important as well. Nobody can underestimate them. But we also have field trips. We have exercises at the labs. We have computer training that we offer. So we have to consider this overall in terms of providing a well-rounded education to our students. And of course, the work prospects are plentiful, from the renewable energy sector to chemical companies, regulators, energy companies, and so on and so forth. Some details about the income of oil and gas professionals. That was in 2018, the latest figures that we have, which is about $200,000 per year for an engineer that has about 17 years of work experience. So just to close, these are some of the companies that they are active regionally and also in Cyprus. To be more specific, there is the government sector, the private sector as well. So this is important that to help yourself by maybe looking for internships, making the most of your studies, whether it's online or whether it's on campus, to be able to equip yourself with what is required to become employable, to be able to not only earn a living, but to succeed in what you're planning to do. So, to sum up, and I close because I'm driving too long, I think, what skills should the future energy engineers possess? So, the number one thing to consider, they have to be problem solvers. So, engineers traditionally, they solve problems. For example, they have to lay a pipeline, or they have to design, for example, a vehicle, or they have to generate electricity, or they have to produce gas from 5,000 meters below the surface, or they have to build an LNG ship. So all of this require problem solving, and mathematics and physics and chemistry are the fundamental high school classes that are going to be needed in order to be able to solve these problems. Of course, other classes, for example, economics and other disciplines are important, surely, but the future basically is going to be digital, increasingly more digital. People have to have programming skills. Artificial intelligence is becoming all the more important. And of course, whoever that is, they have to develop their analytical and reasoning skills. So they have to write well, they have to express themselves well, they have to talk in front of audiences. And of course, they have to respect the environment, right? So all of that are important, integral parts of the future engineers, and they have to be well versed in software packages, because a lot of these are becoming all the time increasingly more important. And at the same time, engineers, they have to be able to get their hands dirty, whether it's laboratory work or experimental work. They have to go on site where the problem is, discover what the problem is, suggest and recommend remedies to that, and be able to keep projects in their time frames. Okay, so these are important attributes, important skills that we cultivate, and we try to teach to our students in order to be able to become successful engineers and to lead a successful life as well. So team spirit is of critical importance, and respect, and of course, above and beyond all, motivation and creativity are some of the elements that has to be fostered in the educational environment, and this is what we try to do to the future engineers that we educate at the University of Nicosia. So with that, I would like to thank you for being patient with us. I have to apologize for the slides not showing well. I can share them with you. If you want, you can get in touch with me, right? And of course, we'll try to share the video through YouTube. If you want to watch it at your own pace, you can do so. So this is what I have to share. Thanks for your time and for being with us. If you have any questions, feel free to type them through YouTube. So if you have any questions, feel free to type them in live comments below the YouTube screen, basically. And I'm here to answer them. Don't be shy. Okay. I mean, if we don't have any questions, or if anyone doesn't want to ask anything, we can conclude today's presentation, and hopefully the next one is going to be trouble-free. Okay, thanks guys. We'll conclude here. You have our contact details and feel free to get in touch with us. These are our contact details. I hope they show. Let me get them to show. Okay, so these are my contact details. This is my email and my telephone number. That's 22 842522. Feel free to get in touch with me. My email is hadjistassou.c@unic.ac.cy, and of course more information can be found on the website of the university. Thank you.